Lieutenant Colonel Derek Morrison had always believed his home was his fortress, and his wife his safe harbor. But that afternoon, arriving at the San Jose train station earlier than expected, he felt that certainty begin to crumble. The crowded platform buzzed with activity as commuters rushed past, but Derek's eyes locked onto a scene that made his blood run cold. There, by the ticket counter, his wife Danica stood wrapped in the embrace of another man. Her arms were around his neck, her face pressed against his chest in an intimacy that was unmistakable. The man was young, probably mid-20s, wearing civilian clothes that suggested he worked somewhere on base. Derek's hands clenched into fists as he watched them. He had just returned from a 3-month deployment, exhausted and eager to surprise his wife. Instead, he was witnessing the ultimate betrayal in the most public of places. He stepped forward, his military bearing making people instinctively move aside. "Danica!" he called out, his voice cutting through the station noise like a blade. She jumped, her face draining of color. The young man beside her froze, his eyes widening as he recognized the rank insignia on Derek's uniform. "Derek, you're back early," she stammered, not even attempting to offer an excuse. The young man tried to slip away, but Derek's voice stopped him cold. "Stay where you are." A crowd began to gather, sensing the tension. Derek didn't care. His hands trembled, but his voice remained controlled, sharp as steel. "How long?" he asked quietly. Danica lifted her chin, a mix of fear and defiance in her eyes. "Does it matter?" "How?" "Long." Each word was punctuated with barely contained rage. 6 months, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The words hit him like a physical blow. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of phone calls where she'd said she loved him, of letters she had written while he was in harm's way. But the infidelity wasn't the worst of it. Later, Derek would learn that Danica had been using their home in San Jose for far more than simple affairs. She had been running a sophisticated operation, renting out rooms for special services, offering clients far more than just accommodation. And the most horrifying part, she had attempted to involve their daughter Becky in the scheme. Derek stood on the platform, the sounds of the train station fading into background noise. His gaze swept over Danica, noting every detail, the expensive new clothes he hadn't bought her, the designer purse, the guilt written across her face. "So this is what you do while I'm protecting this country," Derek said, his voice low and growling. "While I'm away for months at a time." Danica took a step back, clutching her purse like a shield. I won't make excuses, Derek. You wouldn't understand anyway." "Understand?" He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You're right. I don't understand how you could betray everything we built. And then..." He stumbled over the words. "You tried to involve our daughter. Am I supposed to understand that too?" "It's not what you think." Her voice broke into a whisper as she reached toward him. "Don't." He raised his hand, creating an invisible barrier between them. "Who is he?" Derek nodded toward the young man who stood paralyzed with fear. Danica averted her gaze, her shoulders trembling slightly. "Just someone who pays?" She answered so quietly he had to strain to hear. "Pays?" His laugh was cold and joyless, like cracking ice. "Are you selling yourself now? For God's sake, Danica, what else have you sold? Our family? Our home?" Her face contorted with pain, and suddenly she screamed, drawing more attention from the growing crowd. "You leave me alone for months. Do you think it's easy being a military wife? Raising a child on my own, carrying everything on my shoulders while you live your important life?" "Important?" Derek took a step toward her and she instinctively backed up. "My life, which I'm ready to give up every single day for this country? For you? For our family?" Silence fell over their immediate area, the background noise of the train station seeming to fade. Other commuters watched the scene unfold, some recording on their phones, others whispering to each other. Derek's gaze landed on a family photo visible through the clear pocket of Danica's purse. Him, Danica, and their daughter Becky, smiling at a San Jose park last summer. He remembered that day vividly. The warm California sun, Becky laughing as he pushed her on the swings, Danica looking at him with what he'd thought was love. "How could you do this?" he said, not looking at her. His voice wasn't angry anymore, it was tired, as if all his strength had been drained. I don't know, Danica whispered, tears streaming down her face. Derek turned his attention to the young man who had been trying to edge away. What's your name? Stephen, sir, the man stammered. Stephen Jones. Well, Stephen Jones, do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into? Sir, I didn't know she was married to... I mean, I knew she was married, but nothing. Derek cut him off. Get out of my sight before I forget I'm an officer and a gentleman. Stephen didn't need to be told twice. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Derek and Danica alone in their bubble of devastation. Derek pulled out his phone and made a call. This is Lieutenant Colonel Morrison. I need a military police unit at the San Jose train station. Yes, now. Danica's eyes widened. Derek, what are you doing? What I should have done the moment I suspected something was wrong, he said coldly. You're going to answer for everything, Danica. Everything. His suspicions had started during his last deployment at Fort Campbell. Amidst the rigorous training schedules and endless briefings, Derek sat in the officers' club one evening with his old friend and fellow officer, Brian Patterson. Over whiskey, their conversation drifted from work to life, and as it often did, to family. You know, Derek, Brian said, taking a sip from his glass, you're a man of principles. But sometimes I wonder if you're too trusting. All these deployments, the time away from home. Don't you ever worry? Derek chuckled, shaking his head. Worry? About Danica? She's solid, Brian. She and Becky are all I need. Sure, Brian drawled, leaning back. But you know, I heard something recently, probably just gossip, but... Derek raised an eyebrow. Go on. Brian leaned in closer, lowering his voice. There's been talk around San Jose about a woman, supposedly a military wife, who's been entertaining visitors. High-end stuff, if you know what I mean. Every base town has those rumors, Derek snorted. This one's different, Brian insisted. They say she's got a daughter, too. Some guys claim they've seen them both at some of these gatherings. Derek frowned, trying to mask his growing unease. That's ridiculous. Just bored soldiers spreading stories. Maybe, Brian said, studying his friend's face. But the description, expensive taste, lives in a nice area of San Jose, husband deployed frequently. Half the military wives in San Jose fit that description, Derek said. But something in his gut twisted uncomfortably. Brian shrugged. You're probably right. Just thought you should know what people are saying. That conversation haunted Derek for weeks. He started noticing small things in his phone calls with Danica. Her vague answers about her days, the new clothes she mentioned, buying, the girls' nights out, that seemed to happen more frequently. He recalled how Danica had changed over the past year. Shorter skirts, more makeup, a sudden obsession with her appearance. He'd dismissed it as her trying to feel good about herself during his deployments. But what if there was more to it? One night, unable to sleep, Derek decided to call home at an unusual hour. It rang 6 times before Danica answered, her voice breathless. Hello? It's me, did I wake you? Oh, Derek. No, I was just exercising. You know, late night workout. At 2 a.m.? Couldn't sleep, she said quickly, too quickly. Derek heard something in the background. Was that a door closing? Is someone there? What? No, it's just the TV. I had it on for company. But Derek hadn't heard any TV sounds, just that door. And Danica's breathing, which sounded more nervous than exhausted from exercise. How's Becky? He asked, testing. She's at a friend's house, sleepover. On a Tuesday night? A pause. It's a long weekend, teacher planning day on Friday. Derek knew for a fact there was no long weekend. He'd checked the school calendar just days ago when planning his leave. That's when he knew. Something was wrong. Very wrong. When Derek confronted her at the train station, and the truth began to unravel, his only thought was to protect his daughter. After the military police arrived and took initial statements, Derek drove straight to Becky's school. He pulled up just as classes were letting out, scanning the crowd of teenagers for his daughter's familiar blonde hair. When he spotted her, his heart broke. She looked thin, tired, with dark circles under her eyes that no 16-year-old should have. Dad! Becky's face lit up when she saw him, but it quickly shifted to concern. What are you doing here? Mom said you weren't coming home until next week. Get in the car, honey. We need to talk. They drove to a quiet diner on the outskirts of San Jose. Derek ordered coffee while Becky picked at a slice of pie, her eyes never quite meeting his. Becky, he began gently, I need to know what's been happening at home while I've been away. She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Dad, You can tell me anything, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Whatever it is. I promise I'll protect you. Tears welled up in Becky's eyes. I wanted to tell you so many times, but Mom said... She said you wouldn't understand, that you'd blame me. Derek felt his chest tighten. Blame you for what? The men, Becky whispered, her voice breaking. She brought them home when you were deployed. At first, she said they were just friends, people she was helping out by renting the spare rooms, but then... Then what, sweetheart? Becky's tears spilled over. Then I saw money changing hands. I heard things I shouldn't have heard. And when I confronted her about it, she got angry. Said I didn't understand how expensive it was to maintain our lifestyle, to keep up appearances as an officer's wife. Derek's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to remain calm. Did she ever? Did any of these men ever try to hurt you? Not exactly, Becky said, wiping her eyes. But Mom started asking me to be nice to them, to wear certain clothes when they were around, to sit and talk with them. She looked up at her father, her face anguished. Dad, she wanted me to... She said it wasn't a big deal, that I could help the family, that... Stop, Derek said firmly but gently. He moved around to her side of the booth and pulled her into a hug. You don't have to say anymore. I know enough. Becky sobbed into his shoulder. I've been staying at Kimberly's house as much as possible. I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't look at her. Derek held his daughter, feeling a rage building inside him like nothing he'd ever experienced in combat. Danica hadn't just betrayed him. She'd tried to exploit their child. Listen to me, Becky, he said, pulling back to look her in the eyes. You're never going back to that house. Never. I'm going to make sure your mother can never hurt you again. Do you understand? Becky nodded, relief washing over her face. You're not going to leave me, are you? Never, Derek said fiercely. You're my daughter and I will always protect you. Always. He took Becky to stay with his sister Kimberly, who lived across town in San Jose. Then Derek drove home. But in his mind, a plan was already forming. He wouldn't just divorce Danica. He would make sure she faced consequences for everything she'd done. Sitting in the darkness of his study that night, Derek replayed the details over and over, piecing together a grim picture. Danica hadn't just betrayed him. She had built an entire operation, using their home as a base for her activities. She had dared to threaten the most precious thing they had, their daughter. He knew he needed evidence. Solid, undeniable evidence that would leave Danica no room for excuses or defense. A plan solidified in his mind. He wouldn't just destroy her reputation, he would make sure she faced legal consequences for everything. Derek decided it was time to act with precision and purpose. The next morning, Derek called an old acquaintance. Jeffrey Coleman, a private investigator who had helped him years ago with a security clearance issue. Jeffrey, I need your help, he said when the investigator picked up. For you, Colonel, always, Jeffrey replied. What's the situation? It's personal, very personal. I need to know everything about the people coming to my house and whom my wife is meeting. Understood. This sounds serious. More serious than you can imagine, Derek said heavily. And Jeffrey, I need this fast. I'll start today. A few days later, Jeffrey sent his first report. They met at a small cafe in downtown San Jose, away from the base and away from anyone who might know them. Derek, this is a messy situation, Jeffrey said, spreading several photographs across the table. They showed Danica leaving the house with different men, sometimes getting into expensive cars that pulled up near their gate. These guys, Jeffrey pointed at one photo. I've got intel linking them to some questionable businesses around the Bay Area. And this one. He tapped an image of a well-dressed man in his 40s, with his arm around Danica outside an upscale San Jose restaurant, is probably her main client. Client? Derek raised an eyebrow, though he already suspected the answer. This guy pays for everything. Gifts, clothes, expensive dinners, and in return... Jeffrey hesitated. Let's just say Danica isn't doing this just for the money. She's got a whole operation going. Derek clenched his fists, his face remaining stoic, but inside he was seething. What else? Jeffrey pulled out more photos. These showed Becky sitting in a cafe with Danica visible in the background. One of the same men was at a nearby table, his eyes clearly on the teenager. Derek, Jeffrey said quietly, she's involving your daughter. These photos were taken last month at 3 different locations around San Jose. Each time, the same pattern. Danica brings Becky somewhere public. One of these men shows up, tries to engage with her. Derek slid the photographs back into an envelope, leaving one on the table. The picture of Danica with her main benefactor. She'll regret this, Jeffrey. I'll make sure she pays for everything. Jeffrey nodded silently, understanding that this was Derek's moment to seek justice. The next day, Derek started by ensuring Becky was safely settled at his sister Kimberly's house across San Jose. You'll be safe here, sweetheart, he said, hugging her tightly at the doorstep. What about you, Dad? She asked, her eyes filled with concern. Don't worry about me. I'll take care of everything. When he returned to his house, Danica was waiting in the living room, feigning calmness. Derek, you could have at least told me you were taking Becky, she said with forced composure. She's better off staying away from this house, he said coldly, tossing the envelope with photos onto the couch. Danica picked it up, her hands trembling slightly as she looked through the photographs. Her face turned pale, but she quickly tried to compose herself. This doesn't prove anything, she said, her voice icy. This is only the beginning, Danica, Derek replied, his voice quiet but threatening. I'm going to take everything from you. The house, the money, your reputation. You'll be left with nothing. She laughed, but there was fear in her eyes. You can't do that. I'm your wife. Were, he corrected. You were my wife. That ended the moment you put our daughter at risk. He walked out, leaving her alone with the photographs and the weight of what was coming. The next day, Derek received an unexpected message through a mutual acquaintance. The man he'd seen in the photos, the one with his arm around Danica, wanted to meet. He even suggested a location, an exclusive private club in downtown San Jose, known for its wealthy clientele and shadowy dealings. Derek arrived precisely on time, his face calm but his mind calculating every possible angle. He knew this wouldn't be just a simple conversation. At the entrance, a security guard in an expensive suit greeted him. This way, Colonel, the guard said curtly, gesturing toward a private elevator. Derek followed, feeling the weight of the situation. The elevator opened to a luxurious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Jose skyline. A man stood by the window, tall, well-dressed, probably in his mid-40s. He turned with a practiced smile. Colonel Morrison, the man said smoothly. I'm Jeffrey Wilson. Glad you could make it. Derek remained standing, his arms crossed. Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want? Jeffrey poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. Straight to business. I like that. He took a sip. I don't appreciate people digging into matters that don't concern them. Your investigation into my relationship with your wife is becoming problematic. Problematic? Derek's voice was ice cold. You've been using my wife for your schemes and you threatened my daughter. That's more than problematic. Jeffrey's smile faded slightly. Careful, Colonel. You're talking about things you don't fully understand. Your wife came to me. This was her choice. My daughter didn't have a choice, Derek shot back. Ah, yes, Becky, Jeffrey said, and something in his tone made Derek's blood boil. Beautiful girl. Reminds me of her mother at that age. Derek took a step forward. His hands clenched into fists. If you so much as look at my daughter again... You'll what? Jeffrey interrupted, his voice hardening. You're a military officer, Colonel. You play by rules. I don't. You do well to remember that. Is that a threat? It's advice, Jeffrey said, setting down his glass. Walk away from this. Take your daughter, accept the divorce quietly, and move on with your life. Otherwise, things could get complicated. Derek stared at him for a long moment. You're making a mistake if you think I'll back down. I've faced enemy fire, Jeffrey. You don't scare me. Perhaps I should, Jeffrey said coldly. Because unlike your enemies overseas, I know exactly where you and your daughter live, work, and go to school. The threat was clear and direct. Derek felt his training kick in. Assess the threat, plan the response, execute with precision. Thanks for the meeting, Derek said, turning toward the door. You've just made this much easier for me. How's that? Jeffrey called after him. Derek looked back. Now I know exactly what kind of man I'm dealing with. And men like you always make mistakes. He left, knowing that Jeffrey Wilson had just made his biggest error, underestimating a soldier who had everything to fight for. Derek spent the next week working with Jeffrey Coleman, gathering more evidence. They documented Jeffrey Wilson's business dealings, his connections to various illegal operations around the Bay Area, and, most importantly, his relationship with Danica and the operation she'd been running from their home. Late one evening, Derek was reviewing documents in his study when he heard a noise outside. Moving to the window, he saw a car parked across the street, one he didn't recognize. His military instincts kicked in. He went to his safe, retrieved his service weapon, and checked the security cameras he'd recently installed. A figure was approaching the back door. Derek moved silently through the house, positioning himself in the kitchen. When the back door handle began to turn, he was ready. The door burst open and a large man stepped inside. The same security guard from Jeffrey Wilson's office. "Wilson sends his regards," the man said, pulling out a knife. Derek didn't hesitate. Years of combat training took over. He sidestepped the initial attack, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted hard. The knife clattered to the floor. With a swift movement, Derek had the intruder pinned against the wall. His service weapon pressed against the man's back. "Tell Wilson," Derek said quietly, "that I'm not someone who backs down. And if he sends anyone else, they won't leave walking." The man nodded frantically, and Derek released him, watching as he scrambled out the door and disappeared into the night. Derek called Jeffrey Coleman immediately. "We need to move faster. Wilson just made his first mistake." "What happened?" "He sent someone to intimidate me." "Didn't work, but it proves he's worried. That means we're getting close." "I've got more intel," Jeffrey said. "Wilson's been using your wife to launder money through the rental scheme. The documentation is solid. We can bring this to the authorities." "Not yet," Derek said. "I want everything. Every piece of evidence, every connection. When we move, I want to make sure both of them go down permanently." The confrontation came sooner than expected. Derek arrived home 2 days later to find Danica's car in the driveway, and another car he recognized from the surveillance photos. His jaw tightened. He entered through the front door quietly. Voices carried down from upstairs. Danica's laugh, and a man's voice he didn't recognize. Taking the stairs two at a time, Derek pushed open the bedroom door. Danica was there with Stephen Jones, the young man from the train station. They were sitting close on the bed, drinks in hand, clearly not expecting Derek's return. "You've got to be kidding me," Derek said, his voice deadly calm. Stephen jumped up, nearly spilling his drink. "Sir, I can explain." "Get out," Derek said, his eyes never leaving Danica. "Now, before I forget I'm an officer." Stephen grabbed his jacket and fled, his footsteps thundering down the stairs and out the front door. Danica stood, trying to maintain her composure. "Derek, you're overreacting. We were just what?" He cut her off. "Just using our home. My home? For your business? Just continuing to betray everything we built? This is as much my home as yours." She shot back, some of her old defiance returning. "Not anymore," Derek said. He pulled out his phone and showed her a document on the screen. "Divorce papers. Already filed. You have 24 hours to move out." Her face went pale. "You can't just throw me out." "Actually, I can. This house is in my name. Purchased with my military benefits before we married." "You have no legal claim to it." "What about Becky?" "Becky wants nothing to do with you," Derek said coldly. "She told me everything, Danica. Everything you tried to make her do. That alone is enough to ensure you'll never have custody." Danica's mask finally cracked. "You're going to regret this, Derek. I'll tell everyone." "Tell them what? The truth?" "Please do. Because I've got evidence of everything you've done. The affairs, the money laundering, the exploitation. And Jeffrey Wilson? We've got him too." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about? Did you really think I wouldn't investigate? I'm a military intelligence officer, Danica. This is what I do." He pocketed his phone. "You're finished. And unless you want to face criminal charges, you will sign the divorce papers, take whatever clothes you can carry, and disappear from San Jose." "You bastard," she hissed. "Maybe," Derek said, walking toward the door. "But I'm a bastard who protects his daughter. That's more than I can say for you." The morning Danica left was cold and clear. It was early spring, the kind of morning where frost still lingered on the grass, but the sun promised warmth later. Derek sat in the living room with coffee, watching the bedroom door and waiting. When she finally emerged, she was wearing her best coat, a long navy one, and carrying a single suitcase. Her face was hard, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You think I'll just walk away like this?" she said, her voice sharp as she set the suitcase down. "Yes," Derek replied calmly, standing. "Because you have no choice." "You're pathetic," she spat. "You always were. You thought your rank and your uniform made you special. You're nothing. And you're a criminal," he said quietly. "The difference is, I can live with who I am." She grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door. "Damn you, Derek Morrison!" she screamed, turning back at the threshold. He didn't respond. The door slammed behind her and the house fell silent. Later that morning, Derek met with Jeffrey Coleman at their usual cafe. The bright morning sun made everything feel lighter, more hopeful. "You look like you haven't slept all night," Jeffrey observed as Derek sat down. "Haven't had time," Derek admitted. "What have you got?" Jeffrey pulled out a folder. "We found where Wilson conducts his main operations. It's an office building in downtown San Jose, but he uses a warehouse near the port for storage. Documents, probably money, maybe more." "How many people?" "At least a dozen, some of them armed." Derek nodded, his jaw tightening. "Good. Contact the authorities. We're taking them down tonight." By evening, Derek was part of a task force including FBI agents and local police. They gathered near the warehouse, going over the plan one final time. "We move fast," Derek said to the team. "Take them alive if possible, but be ready for resistance." They entered through multiple points simultaneously. Derek led one team through the back entrance, his training and experience guiding every movement. Inside, they found exactly what Jeffrey had described: crates of documents, evidence of money laundering, and more. Several of Wilson's men were apprehended quickly. Derek stormed into the main office area. "Where's Wilson?" he demanded of one of the detained men. "Gone," the man said. "Left hours ago when he heard you were coming." Derek's phone rang. Unknown number. "Who is this?" he answered. "Colonel Morrison," came Jeffrey Wilson's smooth voice. "Your persistence is impressive." "Wilson," Derek growled. "Where are you?" "Somewhere you'll never find me. You think you've won, but you've only made things worse for yourself." "I'll find you," Derek said firmly. "Good luck with that," Wilson said, and the line went dead. Derek stood there, phone in hand, his expression hardening. The investigation had dealt a major blow to Wilson's operation, but the man himself had escaped. But Derek wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Over the next few weeks, the evidence Derek and Jeffrey Coleman had gathered proved devastating. The FBI built a case not just against Jeffrey Wilson, but against Danica as well. The documents showed that Danica had been complicit in Wilson's money laundering scheme, using the rental operation as a cover. She had also passed along information about Derek's deployment schedules and military activities, information that Wilson had sold to interested parties. The revelation that his own wife had been compromising his military operations shook Derek to his core. It wasn't just personal betrayal anymore. It was a matter of national security. The trial became a major story in San Jose and beyond. "Military wife involved in espionage and exploitation ring," read one headline. The media circus was intense, but Derek handled it with the same discipline he brought to everything else. "My only fault was trusting someone who betrayed not just me, but our country and our daughter," Derek testified at the hearing. His words resonated with the public, earning him widespread support. Danica's lawyers tried to claim she was a victim of Wilson's manipulation, but the evidence was overwhelming. She had been an active, willing participant in everything. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Despite her tears and attempts to claim she'd been coerced, the judge was unmoved. "You didn't just betray your husband," the judge said. "You betrayed your duty as a parent and as a citizen. This court shows no leniency for such actions." Jeffrey Wilson was eventually apprehended 3 months later trying to cross into Mexico. He was extradited back to California and faced multiple federal charges. His trial resulted in a life sentence without parole. After the trial concluded, Derek made a decision. He put in his papers for retirement from the Army. His service had been exemplary, and his role in taking down Wilson's operation had earned him commendations. At the retirement ceremony, his commanding officer spoke. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison has served this country with honor and distinction. But more than that, he has shown us that integrity and justice must always prevail, even when, especially when, it costs us personally. For Derek, it was both a moment of pride and the closing of a chapter. He was ready for something different. He and Becky moved to a small house near the coast, not far from Monterey. It was a cozy place with a view of the ocean, the same ocean he'd served on for so many years. Becky enrolled at San Jose State University, choosing to study psychology. "I want to help people who've been through what I went through," she told her father. "I'm proud of you," Derek said, hugging her. "You're going to do amazing things." Their new life was simple. Derek spent his mornings walking on the beach, his afternoons reading or working in the small garden. Becky would come home on weekends and they'd cook dinner together, talking about her classes and her plans for the future. "What's the plan for today, Dad?" Becky would ask over breakfast. "I think I'll try making that lasagna you like," Derek would reply with a smile. "And you can help. No more secrets, no more deployments, no more betrayals. Just a father and daughter rebuilding their lives together." Derek found his peace. His name became synonymous with integrity and courage in military circles. His story was taught at officer training schools as an example of how to maintain honor even in the face of personal devastation. But for Derek, the real victory was simpler than all of that. It was sitting on the porch with his daughter, watching the sunset over the Pacific, knowing that they had survived the worst and come out stronger. His life had begun in service to his country. Now it continued in service to the person who mattered most, his daughter. And for the first time in years, Derek Morrison felt truly at home.